Years. That's all the white tiger gave me. 5 years to love my son before it came to claim him. But I've learned one thing about spirits. Nothing they give is free. And when the debt comes due, someone must pay. My name is Muzi, and this is the story of how I tried to outrun a god. If you love powerful African tales filled with mystery, magic, and emotion, make sure you subscribe. There's another story waiting for you in the next chapter. The sun in Mambo Village rose gently, spilling warm gold across the endless green. The mist lifted slowly from the riverbanks, curling around the towering fig trees before vanishing into the heavens. Children's laughter rang out in the distance, chasing away the quiet of dawn. Cows lowed lazily in the fields, their bells chiming softly as boys with sticks and quick feet guided them toward the open plains. Down by the river, a group of girls balanced clay pots on their heads, their chatter and giggles carrying across the water. Some pretended to scoop the cool river water, but really they lingered for gossip: who was courting who, which families had quarreled, and whose wedding might be next. This was Mambo Village, a place where life was lived in bright, unapologetic color. Here, people could be themselves. Love was not bound by rigid lines, and the heart followed its own path. The smell of wood smoke and roasting maize hung in the air, and every soul seemed stitched into the same tapestry of community. In the heart of this harmony lived the Muzi family, a household known and respected by all. Muzi, the eldest son of his mother's line, was a skilled hunter and provider. His wife, Malula, was known for her kindness and for the way her laughter could break the heaviest of silences. For years, the Manzi home had been filled with longing years of waiting, of whispered prayers under the moonlight, of crushed herbs and offerings to the ancestors. They had tried everything to bring a child into their lives. The elders spoke hope, the healers tried their charms, and still Malula's belly remained empty. Until now. That morning, Muzi returned from a long hunt. His hands carried the weight of a fine impala, its smooth hide glistening in the sunlight. Sweat clung to his brow, but his heart was light today. He had provided well. As he neared his home, he noticed a strange energy in the air. Women passing by greeted him with knowing smiles. 2 young boys darted away from his path, whispering and glancing back. When he stepped into the yard, he found his mother, Makumalo, moving quickly between the cooking hut and the sleeping quarters, her hands trembling as she carried bundles of cloth. "Ma!" Muzi called, a frown cutting across his face. "What's wrong? Who is sick?" She didn't answer immediately, her eyes darting toward the doorway of the sleeping hut. Alarm shot through him. He dropped the impala to the ground and rushed inside, expecting the worst, only to find Malula standing there, her frame draped in one single fur cloth. In Mambo tradition, a woman wore this only for one reason. Muzi's breath caught. His eyes moved from the cloth to her glowing face, to the hand she rested over her stomach. "No," he whispered, as if afraid to believe it. "Is it?" Malula's smile broke into tears. She nodded. The air left his lungs. He dropped to his knees before her, gripping her hands and pressing them to his face. Laughter and sobs spilled out of him all at once. After so many years of waiting, hoping, and hurting, it was finally happening. That night, the village would feast. Muzi looked at the impala lying outside and made a decision. "Today," he declared, "is a day of joy." He began to prepare the meat himself, cutting and seasoning it with care. Smoke curled up into the sky as the first pieces hit the fire. His mother worked beside him, her eyes softer than they had been in years. The news spread quickly. By midday, neighbors were arriving with baskets of mealy meal, fresh vegetables, and gourds of sour milk. Old men brought drums, young men brought their laughter, and the women began to sing the songs of celebration. But beneath Muzi's joy lay a history he had never truly escaped. Muzi had been born into humble beginnings. His father, a man of wealth and influence, had 4 wives. In such a household, the position of each wife determined the fortunes of her children. Muzi's mother, Makumalo, had not been the first wife, nor the last, and she came from no wealthy lineage. This placed her at the lowest rank in the family's hierarchy. To make matters worse, the marriage between his parents had been arranged for political ties, not for love. His father had always carried a quiet resentment toward her, as if she were a burden rather than a partner. When Makumalo became pregnant with Musi, the tension in the household grew unbearable. The other wives whispered in corners, the servants traded glances. The cause of this unrest was a single thing, the prophecy of the great white tiger. The elders of Mambo had long spoken of it. Generations ago, a seer had foretold that a child born under certain signs in the season of heavy rains, during the roar of the eastern winds, would carry the spirit of the great white tiger. Such a child would bring both greatness and chaos. They would rise to protect the village in times of darkness, but would also usher in storms that could divide bloodlines and reshape destinies. On the night Makumalo's pregnancy was discovered, a white tiger had been sighted in the hills beyond the river, an animal so rare it was almost myth. The elders whispered that the signs matched perfectly. Fear outweighed wonder. Muzi's father, pressed by the senior wives in the village council, made a decision that would haunt Makumalo forever. She was cast out from the main homestead before Muzi was even born. She found shelter in the small outer lands of the village, among distant relatives. Life there was simple but harsh. She raised Muzi with a fierce love, teaching him to stand tall even when the world turned its back. From his earliest years, Muzi carried the whispers of the prophecy like a shadow. Some people looked at him with respect, others with unease. Over time, he proved himself in the hunt, in his honesty, in his loyalty to the village. Yet even in his happiest moments, he could feel that ancient thread tugging at his life, as if the great white tiger still walked somewhere in his footsteps. Now, as the drums began to beat for his unborn child, a strange wind stirred through the village, the kind that made elders glance at the horizon and mutter blessings under their breath. Muzi didn't notice. His eyes were fixed on Malula, his heart filled with nothing but joy. For now he believed the prophecy had no place here. But the great white tiger had a way of returning when least expected. In the heart of Mambo Village, stories traveled faster than the wind. They seeped into children's dreams, echoed in the night fires, and wove themselves into the fabric of the people's beliefs. And among the oldest of details was the one about the great white tiger, the god known as Daga. Long ago, before Mambo had been carved from forest and field, Daga was said to have walked among mortals. Some claimed he had the head of a tiger and the body of a man. Others swore he was pure beast, snow-white fur streaked with scars from countless battles. His roar could shake mountains, his claws could tear through stone, and his gaze could melt the courage from the fiercest warrior. The elders said Daga had fought great wars to save humanity, that when the earth was split by the blood of rival tribes, when rivers ran red and famine stalked the land, Daga descended from the spirit realm. He stood against monsters, men, and spirits alike, forcing a peace that lasted for generations. But time has a way of distorting memory. As centuries passed, the story shifted. Where once Daga had been savior, now some called him destroyer, a god of conflict and chaos. They said his presence stirred war, that his blessings brought as much suffering as strength. He was no longer just a god. To some, he was a demon who marked the impure, binding their fates to unrest. For Muzi, this legend was not a distant tale. He bore the mark of the white tiger, a pale birthmark on his shoulder, in the shape of a curling claw. His father had seen it when Muzi was born, and felt the cold hand of dread close around his heart. Not because he believed only in the curse, but because he understood its power to threaten his position. Muzi's father was not merely a man of wealth. He was a figure of influence, respected in councils, feared in negotiations, and admired by those who measured worth by cattle herds and gold rings. Power was his lifeblood, and power in the hands of another, even his own son, was something he could not bear. The household already had an heir, the first wife's eldest boy. That son was the one destined to inherit the largest share of land, cattle, and respect. If the village began to believe Muzi's mark was a divine sign, it could upend that order. Inheritance wars in Mambo's history had torn entire clans apart. Muzi's father had no intention of letting prophecy or superstition place his younger, lower-ranked wife's son above his own chosen heir. But how had the mark come to Muzi? The answer reached back not just to his birth, nor to his mother's youth, but 5 centuries earlier to an event whispered about only in fragments. It began in the dry season, when the rivers shrank into cracked beds and the sun turned the air brittle. Makumala Muzi's mother was at the lowest rank among her husband's wives. She had no servants to fetch her water, no favored status to earn her special treatment. She rose with the sun to cook, to clean, to tend to what little she had, and on that fateful day, to search for water when the family's clay pots stood empty. The main river near the homestead was gone, just dust and fissures where water once shimmered. She bent down, touched the cracked earth, and felt only heat. Her throat was already dry, but it was the thought of the other wives' smug faces when she returned empty-handed that stung the most. Her mother's words came back to her, then a half-forgotten story of a hidden river deep within the Malo forest, a place where water never ran dry. The forest, she'd been told, was dangerous. Thick vines hung like traps, thorn bushes guarded its edges, and the canopy was so dense the sun barely reached the ground. But Makumala was desperate. She tied her headscarf tighter, picked up her clay pot, and began the 20-minute walk to the forest's edge. The air there was different, cooler, but filled with a stillness that prickled at her skin. She hesitated, her bare feet curling in the soil, and then stepped inside. The path was treacherous. Thorny branches clawed at her skirt, leaving scratches on her legs. Rocks jutted from the earth, forcing her to slow her steps. She tore strips from her headscarf to mark her path, tying them to branches so she would not lose her way. Then she heard it, a sound like a deep, muffled growl mixed with a sharp whimper, pain wrapped in power. Her heart thudded painfully. She knew she should turn back, but something in that sound pulled her forward. She pushed through a tangle of vines and froze. There, on the forest floor, lay a tiger, not just any tiger, but one whose fur was white as fresh cream, marked with faint stripes that shimmered like silver in the filtered light. Its paw was twisted, a thick thorn lodged deep in the flesh. Even in its pain, the creature was magnificent, its eyes gold as molten sun locked on hers. Makumalo's instinct screamed at her to run, but her body moved forward. The tiger flinched, trying to push itself away, but the injured paw gave out. It let out a sound between a snarl and a cry. Her hands trembled, but she remembered her mother's teachings. A spirit in pain is more dangerous than one in rage, for it has nothing to lose. She crouched low, whispering soft words she barely understood. Slowly, she moved to the side, drawing the tiger's attention with her voice. When his gaze followed her, she reached quickly and pulled at the thorn. The tiger roared a sound that shook leaves from the trees and bolted into the shadows. She sighed in relief until she saw it stopped a few paces away, looking back at her. Its head tilted, eyes burning into hers, as if to say, "Follow." Her mind said she was mad, but her feet obeyed. The tiger led her through the forest to a hidden place where the trees parted to reveal a waterfall. The water cascaded down into a pool so clear she could see the pebbles at the bottom. The air smelled of rain, fresh and alive. She dipped her hands into the pool and drank. It was the sweetest water she had ever tasted, cool and pure. She filled her pot to the brim, her heart light for the first time that day. That was the tiger's thank you. When she returned home, her mother gasped at the sight of the water. She warned her, "This water will make you glow with health. It will make life sweeter, but never grow greedy. The river is sacred, and the spirits take their due in ways you cannot choose." Makumalo laughed off the warning. She returned to the waterfall again and again, each time feeling stronger, more beautiful. Even her husband, who had never spared her kindness, began to look at her with new interest. Then came the day she saw a glimmer beneath the water. It was a fish scales like liquid gold, fins like woven silk. Without thinking, she caught it. That night she cooked and ate it. The flesh was delicate, richer than anything she had tasted. But the next season passed without a pregnancy. Then another, then another. Fear crept in. She went to the healer, who told her she had angered the water spirit of the falls. To make amends, she was told, she must return to the pool with offerings, grain, beads, and a token of her own hair. She obeyed, not knowing that the true price was far beyond her understanding. The spirit granted her fertility again, but with a curse bound in silence. Her first son would bear the mark of the great white tiger, and through him the debt would one day be collected. The night Mambo celebrated the Muzi air was one of firelight and music. Drums thundered beneath the stars, calling dancers to the open space at the center of the village. Women in bright skirts stamped and spun, their beads clattering with each movement. Men clapped in rhythm, laughter rising over the beat. The smell of roasting impala drifted through the air, mingling with the rich scent of maize porridge and the sharp tang of homebrewed beer. Children darted between legs, carrying scraps of meat in their small hands, their mouths shining with grease. Muzi sat at the heart of it all, pride swelling in his chest. Every song, every cheer, every clap of a hand seemed to bless the child that had not yet been born. He watched Malula laugh with the other women, her face glowing in the firelight, one hand resting protectively over her belly. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to believe that life had finally tilted in his favor. When the last drumbeat faded and the fire burned low, Muzi walked his wife home. The air was cool, the moon hanging like a silver shield above the fields. Inside their hut, the warmth of the celebration lingered. Malula leaned against him as they lay down, her breathing slow and even. Sleep took him gently, like a river pulling him into its current. He woke to silence. Not the peaceful hush of night, but a silence so thick it pressed against his ears. The air was colder now, the moonlight spilling into the hut pale and strange. A shadow moved at the edge of the room. His heart lurched. He reached for the spear he kept near the doorway, but stopped when he saw it. The tiger. It was enormous, filling the space between the walls as if the hut had stretched to contain it. Its fur was the pure white of fresh ash, its stripes glistening faintly like wet silver. The eyes, gold, deep, and unblinking, held him still. Muzi Manzi. The tiger's voice was not heard so much as felt, a vibration in his bones. He could not answer. His mouth was dry, his breath short. I have come, the tiger said, for what is owed. A memory stirred in him, a story his mother had once told, whispered late at night when the other children slept. A story about a debt paid not in gold, but in blood. The waterfall, the water spirit, the golden fish. The tiger's gaze pierced him. 5 years. I grant you 5 years to hold your firstborn. Muzi's body went cold. When the child is 5, the tiger continued, he will come to me. He will serve as my voice among men. The words seemed to scrape against Muzi's mind. My son? He managed to whisper. The tiger's tail flicked slowly. Your first son will walk with me. Your first daughter will belong to the water spirit. No more than 2 children shall pass through your wife's womb. This is the bargain sealed before you were born. Muzi's chest tightened. And if I refuse? The tiger's lips pulled back in something between a snarl and a grin. The debt will still be paid. Refusal only brings pain sooner. The room dimmed, the tiger's form blurring at the edges. When the 5th year comes, the voice rumbled, already fading, I will return. Muzi blinked, and he was alone. The night sounds returned, the cool air warmed, and the moonlight lay soft on the floor. Morning came too quickly. He woke with sweat soaking his chest, the echo of golden eyes in his mind. Malula was still sleeping, her face peaceful, unaware of the shadow that now hung over their future. The joy of the night before was gone, replaced by a gnawing dread that made his stomach churn. He could not tell her. He could not see her smile fade into fear. But the silence was its own poison. In the days that followed, Muzi tried to carry on as before. He went to the fields, joined the men in the cattle kraal, hunted when the season allowed. But the truth was, his mind never left the tiger's words. 5 years. Every time he looked at Malula's swelling belly, he saw not a future, but a countdown. He began to distance himself without meaning to. Where once he would sit with her in the evenings, telling her the little stories of the day, now he stayed out late, wandering the edge of the village until night swallowed the fields. Where once he would touch her belly and smile, he now found his hands curling into fists at his sides. The more she tried to draw him close, the more he pulled away. At first, Malula thought it was just the strain of preparation, the pressure of becoming a father. But as the moons passed, her patience thinned. One evening, as the smell of stew filled her hut, she said quietly, "You do not look at me the way you did before." Muzi's throat tightened. "I am tired." "You are hiding," she said, her eyes holding his. He could not meet her gaze. "Muzi," she pressed, "if something is wrong, we face it together." "There is nothing," he lied. The lie tasted like ash. Days turned to weeks. The tension in their home became a quiet war. No shouting, no broken pots. Just the sharp absence of what they had shared. Muzi sought answers in secret. He visited elders in distant villages, offering gifts for old knowledge. He crept to the edge of the mallow forest at night, whispering into the dark, hoping the water spirit might hear and grant mercy. Every path ended the same way, with the reminder that debts to the spirit realm are not easily broken. Yet somewhere deep inside him, a spark of defiance flickered. 5 years was a long time. Long enough, perhaps, to find another way. Long enough to bargain, to fight, or to disappear entirely. The thought brought a bitter kind of hope. But it also brought fear, for every day spent searching for a way out was a day Malula watched her husband slip further from her. And Malula, though patient, was not blind. The next few weeks became a maze of secrets for Muzi. He carried them like stones in his chest, heavy, cold, and impossible to put down. Yes. Every morning he rose before the sun and slipped out of the hut, sometimes not returning until dusk. He told Malula he was helping the herdsmen repair the kraal fences or meeting with traders from the lowlands. In truth, he was searching. Searching for anyone who might know how to unbind a curse sealed before his birth. He went first to the oldest elder in Mambo Village, a man so wrinkled it seemed the years had folded him into himself. Nkanyezi had lived long enough to see the river dry and flood twice over, to see men rise and fall like the shifting of the wind. Muzi brought him tobacco, a fat hen, and a gourd of millet beer. The old man accepted the gifts, listening in silence as Muzi spoke in careful half-truths. A friend whose family had angered a spirit, a debt that might claim his firstborn. Nkanyezi's cloudy eyes sharpened with something close to fear. "If the debt is to Daga," he said slowly, "then the spirit of the waterfall and the tiger are bound as one. There is no undoing what was promised, only trading." "Trading?" Muzi asked. Nkanyezi's voice dropped. "You give something of equal value, but what is equal to a firstborn?" The answer settled between them like a stone dropped into still water. The next moon, Muzi traveled to the western hills where the healers of the Olambe people lived. Their reputation was for deep knowledge of spirit debts and a high price for their aid. He sat before Mother Afi, a woman whose hair was silver, but whose eyes seemed as sharp as a hawk's. She wore beads carved with strange symbols, each one said to bind a spirit's favor. When he explained his plight, she shook her head. "The tiger is not easily cheated. You could run, hide, even leave Mambo. But the spirit's reach is not bound by land. Wherever the sun touches your child, the tiger will find him." Muzi clenched his jaw. There must be a way, and Mother Afi studied him. "There is one thing, a story I have heard of a man who gave the spirit another life in place of his child, a sacrifice human or otherwise. But beware, Muzi Munzi. When you choose such a path, you may lose more than you save." He returned home more restless than before. The nights felt colder, the shadows heavier. Sometimes in the hours just before dawn, he thought he heard the faint sound of padded footsteps circling their hut. Once, when he stepped outside, he found deep claw marks etched into the dirt. The wind carried the faintest scent of wet earth like the forest after rain. Malula began to notice the changes. She noticed how Muzi flinched when she placed his hand on her belly, as though the life growing there burned his skin. She noticed how he would stare into the fire at night, eyes unfocused, lips pressed tight. At first, she tried gentleness. She would tell him of the baby's movements, of the dreams she had of their child's face. She cooked his favorite meals, invited him to join her in the gatherings with other expectant mothers. But his distance grew. One evening, as they sat eating in silence, she said, "You are here, but you are not here." He kept his gaze on the stew. "You smile when others look," she went on, "but when it is just us, you are cold. Have I done something to shame you?" Muzi swallowed hard. "It is not you." "Then what is it?" she asked. "You were full of joy when we learned I was with child, and now it is as if you mourn before the child is even born." He met her eyes then just for a moment, and the weight of what he could not say pressed his tongue still. "I cannot explain," he said finally, and pushed the food away. Hurt bloomed in her chest, but Malula was not a woman to break easily. She began watching him more closely. She saw how he would leave before sunrise with no spear or bow, as if his hunts were only a story. She noticed the small offerings beads, food, herbs missing from their storage baskets. She even found him once standing at the edge of the forest, murmuring words too low for her to hear. Something was wrong, and if he would not tell her, she would have to find out herself. As Malula's belly grew, so did the strange happenings. One morning she woke to find the doorway of their hut dusted with white fur. Another day she saw water pooling at the edge of the yard, though it had not rained for weeks. The elders said these were omen signs that spirits walked close. Some women whispered blessings when she passed. Others stepped aside as though afraid to touch her. At night she began to dream of water. Always water clear and endless, with something moving beneath its surface. In some dreams she would see a great shape in the depths, white and gliding. In others she would see the golden glimmer of fish scales. When she told Muzi, he only grew paler. Muzi's fear was no longer just for the child. It was for himself. The tiger had given him 5 years, but 5 years was only a promise if the spirit kept its word. What if it changed its mind? What if it came sooner? And worst of all, what if the child was born under a sign that made the spirit claim him immediately? By the 7th month, the tension between them had hardened into something sharp. They no longer touched unless necessary. Conversations were brief, functional. One night, unable to bear the silence, Malula finally confronted him. "Muzi," she said, her voice trembling not with fear but with frustration. "I will not raise this child with a ghost for a husband. If there is a danger, I deserve to know." He froze, his back to her. "Do you think I am too weak to hear the truth?" she pressed. "Or do you think I will curse you for it? I am your wife. If you carry a burden, it is mine too." He turned then, and for a heartbeat she thought he might tell her everything. His mouth opened, and then he shook his head. "Some things," he said quietly, "are safer left in silence." Malula's eyes hardened. "Silence will not save you, Muzi. It will only leave you alone." She walked past him, out into the night, leaving him with the echo of her words. The moon hung high, pale and pitiless, as Muzi stood in the doorway watching her go. Somewhere in the distance, beyond the village, he thought he heard the faint rolling growl of a tiger. It sounded almost like laughter. That night, Muzi didn't sleep. He lay on the mat, staring into the shadows. Every sound magnified the rustle of grass outside, the creak of the wooden frame, the faint hiss of wind through the thatch. In his mind, the tiger's voice repeated over and over, 5 years. It was not a promise. It was a countdown. In the following days, Muzi began to avoid being alone with Malula entirely. If she was in the cooking hut, he found a reason to be at the kraal. If she was at the river, he would go to the marketplace. He told himself it was for her own good. The less she knew, the safer she would be. But in truth, it was because he could not bear to see her joy and know he was powerless to protect it. Malula noticed. When she asked where he went, his answers were vague. The fields, the elders' council, hunting. Yet when she checked, she would find the fields empty, no elders' meeting called, no fresh game brought home. She began to suspect there was another woman. The thought burned in her chest, stoking a new kind of anger. She told herself it was foolish. Muzi had never shown such interest in any other. But the late nights, the evasive words, the way he avoided her touch, it all gnawed at her. One afternoon, Malula decided to follow him. She waited until he left, then slipped a scarf over her head and kept her distance, staying behind trees and huts. Muzi walked quickly, glancing over his shoulder more than once, until he reached the narrow path that led toward the mallow forest. Her breath caught. No one went into that forest lightly, not without reason. She watched as he stopped at the edge, knelt, and placed something on the ground. She couldn't see what it was, but his hands moved with reverence, arranging it carefully before bowing his head. Then he began to speak. His lips moved, the words carried away by the wind, but his tone was low and urgent. When he finally stood, he left the offering there and walked away. Malula waited until he was gone, then crept forward. On the ground lay a small woven basket containing beads, a handful of cowrie shells, and a lock of hair she recognized instantly hers. A shiver ran through her. And that night, she didn't confront him. She lay beside him in silence, her mind racing. Whatever Muzi was doing, it involved the forest, offerings, and somehow her. Meanwhile, Muzi's desperation deepened. He had learned from Mother AFI that there was one possible exchange, offering the life of another to take the place of his child. But who could he give? No stranger's life would satisfy the spirit. It would have to be someone bound to him by blood or bond. The thought curdled in his stomach. Still, he searched. He spoke to wandering traders, healers passing through, even madmen in the outerlands who claimed to have spoken to spirits. Most laughed at him. Others warned him to accept his fate. Only one man, a scarred traveler named Lemba, offered something different. They met at dusk outside the village. Lemba's voice was hoarse, as if every word scraped his throat. "You cannot kill the dead," he said, "but you can hide the deader." Muzi frowned. "Hide, my child?" "In plain sight," Lemba said. "If the child does not know his name, if the spirits cannot hear it called, they cannot find him. But you must be willing to cut him off from everything, even you." The idea tore at Muzi's heart. To save his son, he would have to lose him. The weeks crawled toward the birth. The air grew heavy with heat, the sky often bruised with the threat of storms, and the signs worsened. One morning, Malula woke to find the clay pot of water beside her bed, filled with fish scales. Another day, a trail of wet paw prints led from the doorway of their hut into the fields, though it had not rained in months. The midwives began to murmur that the child would be touched by the spirit realm. One even suggested that Malula give birth outside the village to avoid bringing misfortune to the rest. Muzi's fears sharpened into paranoia. He began sleeping with a spear within arm's reach. At night, he sometimes thought he saw movement in the corners of the hut, a flicker of white fur, a glint of gold eyes. Malula's patience broke 2 moons before her due date. "I saw you at the forest," she said one evening, her voice steady but her eyes blazing. "I saw the offerings. I saw my hair." Muzi froze. "Tell me," she demanded. "Tell me what you are doing, or I will go to the elders myself." The threat cut through him like a blade. He wanted to tell her everything, to pour out the whole truth, but the thought of her knowing the tiger's claim felt like a death sentence all its own. "It is for protection," he said finally. "For you. For the child." Her face softened just a fraction. "Then why does it feel like you are protecting yourself from me?" He had no answer. That night, she wept quietly beside him. Muzi lay awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling the space between them widen until it felt like the breadth of the forest itself. The last weeks of the pregnancy were the hardest. The village prepared for the birth, women weaving blankets, men readying a goat for sacrifice and thanks to the ancestors. But in the Muzi hut, the air was thick, with unspoken words. Malula moved with the calm focus of an expectant mother, but her laughter no longer came easily. Muzi kept busy from dawn until well past dusk, as if the child might be born in his absence and the tiger would not notice. But the tiger was always near. Sometimes Muzi would hear a low rumble from somewhere in the night, too deep and resonant to be any ordinary animal. Once walking back from the kraal, he saw a flash of white in the tall grass, gone before he could blink. And once, just once, he thought he saw the tiger in full standing at the edge of the fields. Its golden eyes fixed on him. It did not move. It did not need to. Its presence was enough to freeze the blood in his veins. When the labor pains came, it was during a storm. The rain fell in sheets, drumming against the roof. Thunder rolled low and long, like the growl of something ancient. The midwives came quickly, their arms full of cloth and herbs. The fire in the corner burned bright, casting the hut in a flickering glow. Muzi stood outside, pacing, the rain soaking through his clothes. Every cry from within was a blade between his ribs, joy and fear bound together. And somewhere beyond the storm, he thought he heard it again. A roar. The child's cry came just before dawn. The midwife stepped out, smiling. "A strong boy," she said, "born under the rain, blessed by the sky." Muzi's knees went weak. A boy. He stepped inside, and there was Malula, exhausted but glowing, cradling their son. The baby's skin was warm, his tiny fist curled tight. But when Muzi saw his left shoulder, his breath caught. A pale mark, curved like a claw. The tiger's mark. The joy that should have flooded him was instead swallowed by the knowledge that the countdown had begun. 5 years. 5 years to find a way to break the bargain, or to lose his son forever. The day labor found Malula. The sky was ordinary. More birds cut neat lines over the fields. Goats nosed at fallen marula fruit. Women traded gossip and salt in the shade of the fig tree. No one could have guessed how quickly the day would tilt. It began with a tightening beneath Malula's ribs, hot and sudden, as if a rope had been pulled inside her. She paused at the doorway of the hut, breathing through it, one hand on the lintel, the other on her belly. Another tightening came, closer than the last. She called softly for Makumalo, and the older woman came at once, eyes bright with the kind of worry that moves fast and holds tight. "It is time," she said, and her voice was calm, steady, practiced. "We will call the midwives." Malula nodded, but another wave closed over her, and she sank to her knees. It was a month too soon, or a week too late, depending on which elder you listened to. It was also the one day Muzi had gone to the far fields to inspect a distant kraal fence. He had not meant to be gone long. He had not meant to be gone at all. But fate does not ask. Makumalo sent a small boy sprinting down the road. "Find Muzi," she told him. "Run until your breath breaks, then borrow another breath and keep running." The boy ran. Inside the hut, the midwives arrived, brown hands already slick with herbs and oil, voices low and sure. They laid clean cloth. They tied back hair. They prayed without saying the word prayer. Men were not allowed in the birthing hut. Muzi had grown up knowing this. He agreed with it, respected it. Until he didn't. The first cry tore through the day. Malula's, not the baby's. It made the goats stop chewing and listen. An hour passed, then 2. The midwives' voices sharpened. Makumalo moved faster, fetching water, fetching cloth, fetching strength she was not sure she had. Blood came when it should not have. It came again and again. The little boy found Muzi halfway across the plains, breathless, eyes wild. "Baba, your wife, now!" Muzi ran. He ran like a flaming brand across dry grass. He ran until the road gathered beneath him and unspooled behind him until the breath needled his lungs and the world reduced to a single door. He reached the hut and stopped. The rule slapped his chest like a hand. "Men do not enter." He pressed his palm to the reed mat that was the door. "Lula," he called, voice breaking. I am here. Inside, the midwife shared a look. Talk to her, one said through the doorway. Call her back when she drifts. He leaned close. Hear me, he said, and he did not recognize his own voice. I am not leaving the door. I am standing. If the door falls, I will hold it back with my hands. If the day fails, I will light another day and hand it to you. Another contraction took her, dark and deep. She wrote it with a hissed prayer, teeth clenched, fingers gripping the mat. The sky did a strange thing. Though it was noon, though the sun was clean and high, a roundness crept over the light. The day dulled like a blade. Then, improbably, impossibly, the moon showed its face red as rubbed clay, visible in full daylight, staining the world in a brief, eerie wash. The women glanced up and down again. Omen or trick of the eye, there was no time to name it. Push when we say, a midwife murmured, and when you think you have nothing left, push again. Malula pushed. She pushed until the edges of the world grew thin. She pushed until her breath broke and mended and broke again. She pushed and felt herself sliding away from her body, as if she were walking along the riverbank watching another woman give birth. Makumalo knelt at her head, thumbs stroking the slick hair back from her brow. Come back, she whispered. Do not go where I cannot follow. Outside, Muzi pressed his forehead to the door. I am here, he said again. Lula, I am here. You will not do this alone. She heard his voice like a distant drum. She gathered it into her hands and used it like a rope. With a sound that was both a shout and a sob, she bore down. One last time, the kind of push that harvests the very marrow for strength. A cry split the air. The world turned right side up. Inside, the midwives laughed, sudden and bright. A voice called out, a boy! Strong lungs! Musi's knees softened. He slid down the wall and sat in the dust, laughing, crying, choking on both. All at once, the worries fell away. The silent nights, the bright omens, the way fear had nested in his ribs. There was a boy. There was a cry. There was breath where there had not been breath. When they let him look, he did not step over the threshold. He would not break the rule. But they held the child up to the doorway for him. The baby's face was red and angry at the light. His fists balled like small stones. Lulama, Muzi said, the name lifting of its own accord, for the gentleness that masks strength. Lula, Malula echoed, weak and smiling. Lulama. Lula, son. That night the village sang. That night Muzi slept. And that night, after the songs thinned and the fires sighed, the white tiger came. It came as it always came, without sound, without weight, as if the floor bent of its own courtesy. It filled the far corner of the hut with a presence the air could barely carry. Only Muzi saw, only Muzi heard. The tiger's eyes glowed the way a river glows with moon caught in its skin. It looked not at Muzi, but at the bundle in Malula's arms, and when it breathed, the cooking pots in the corner rang like faint bells. It did not speak. It did not need to. It held his gaze for 3 heartbeats, then turned its great head, and with one slow exhale, a thin white hair drifted down and settled on the child's blanket. A sign, a signature, a knowing. Then it was gone. In the morning, when Muzi found that single white hair, he cupped it like a coal and hid it in a gourd. He told himself a new story. If a first son can be claimed, then a second son can be spared. If fate makes narrow rules, perhaps a father can learn to walk along the edge of them. He did not say this aloud. He did not say anything at all. For a while, life allowed him the mercy of small days. 4 years can be an empire when they are the first 4 of a child's life. Lulama grew quick on his feet and quicker with his smile. He was a cyclone and a song, mud up his calves, sun in his hair, questions in his pockets. He climbed the mango tree before he learned to say mango. He learned to whistle before he learned to listen. He trailed goats and returned without them, trailed chickens and returned with 3 more than the village owned. He learned to greet elders with both hands and learned to steal sweets with one. Malula followed the wake of his days, laughing and scolding in equal measure. She did not mind the messes because the messes proved life had decided to stay. She understood why mothers hide treasured things high, because small hands will love anything to pieces. Sometimes the mark on his shoulder, curved pale stroke like a claw, caught the light. It did not frighten her. She kissed it and called it your leaf, as if he'd been born brushed by the forest itself. Muzi loved his son fiercely and fearfully. He built him a toy bow and taught him to shoot only at shadows. He taught him to listen to wind before listening to words. He taught him, without saying why, to never speak his full name to the river. When Lulama slept, Muzi counted the days as if they were beads. He could feel 5 years like a wall approaching, brick by brick. He tried to fill the days with purpose. He planted a new row of moringa trees. He traded hides for books from the traveling teacher and traced the letters with Lulama's curious finger. He worked late, loved softly, prayed rarely, and listened always, especially at night, for footsteps not meant for human ears. He thought he might tell the truth to Malula. He planned how to begin. He planned and planned until planning became the thing he did instead of speaking. The 5th year turned its face toward them. One afternoon, as Malula went to gather firewood along the far edge of the mallow forest, she saw an old woman sitting on a fallen trunk. Her dress was not like the village's cloth, woven instead from something that looked like reeds and mist. Her hair was the wild gray of storm spray, and yet her skin had the brightness of wet stone. The old woman smiled with small, perfect teeth. "When a river sends for you," she said as if continuing an old conversation, "you don't pretend you didn't hear." Malula hesitated, wood against her hip. "Gogo, the forest is thick today. Are you lost?" "I live where pathways are questions," the old woman said. "I am never lost there." She looked beyond Malula as if watching a child run past her ankles. "Your son runs fast." Malula's mouth went dry. "You know me." "I know the water that knows you," the old woman said. "I know what the tiger knows. I know what your husband tries to unknow." "Speak plainly," Malula whispered. "Please." "The boy is not a boy," the old woman said, and her voice was kind in the way of knives wrapped in silk. "He is a debt packaged as a son, a price owed for hunger that tasted what it should not have. You cannot delay it. You cannot hide it. A debt is a river. It finds the lowest place and fills it." Malula's knees found the ground. The bundle of wood tilted and fell beside her. "He is my child," she said, and her voice cracked in the middle, turning childlike itself. "He is mine. You and the river disagree on a few words," the old woman said, "but the river is stubborn. What must we do?" "You must be the ones to pay," the old woman said. "The tiger will not steal. The water will not snatch. You must open your hands and release. If you do not, the hands of the world will close around you and squeeze." "What does that mean?" Malula pleaded. "Famine," the old woman said. "Sickness. Rot in the granaries. Cracks in the places where love lives." Malula swallowed something hot and metallic. "No. Bring him when the 5th year ends," the old woman said, as if naming a market day. "Bring him to the place where the waterfall sings. If you fail the river will fail the village, and then the village will fail you." "Who are you?" Malula whispered. "A mouth," the old woman said. "Water needs many mouths." When Malula raised her head, the fallen log was only a fallen log. The doorway of the forest stood open and empty as a yawn. The old woman was a rumor again. Malula gathered the wood with hands that did not feel like hands, and walked home so quickly she left her shadow behind. She burst into the yard, breath ragged, eyes wild. "Muzi!" He came out at once, reading the news on her face before she spoke. He opened his mouth to say a softer thing, but she brought a harder thing first. "Tell me the truth." He tried to smile. He tried to make it all smaller than it was. "You met an old woman," he said. "The forest is full of strange talkers." "She said our son is a debt," Malula said, and the gentleness she wore like a shawl fell off her. "She said we must be the ones to give him away. She said we cannot delay. She said, she said the tiger knows. There was no smaller shape for the truth to wear. Muzi's shoulders lowered, and with them something inside him unclenched, the way a fist unclenches when it realizes it cannot hold the storm. He told her. He told her about the midnight visitor, the 5 years, the first son marked, and the old promise knotted in his mother's youth. He told her about the offerings by the forests, the distant healers, the bad advice and the worse options. He told her about the white hair in the gourd and the way the tiger's silence could fill a room like smoke. With every word, Malula's face changed shape. Shock sat first, a stranger on the couch. Then betrayal took its place, kicked its shoes off. Then grief sprawled, unashamed. You knew, she said. All this time you knew. And you let me love him without knowing I might be loving an hourglass. I wanted to find a way, Muzi said. I thought if I could. You thought you could outrun water, she said, or stand in front of it and part it with your hands. I thought I could buy 5 years, then steal 5 more, he said. I thought I could be a father and a thief at once. What do we do? She asked, but she did not mean it as a question. She meant it as a test. Will you say the thing I cannot say? We could run, he said, because he had not yet learned there is no outside to a circle drawn by gods. We have not even tried to run. Her eyes flared. Then we run. They packed quickly, clumsily, like thieves in their own home. A little food, a blanket, a knife wrapped in cloth. The gourd with the white hair inside. Makumalo watched them with eyes like wells. Go, she said, and her voice trembled. I tell the truth now because I lied with my silence then. I drank from that water as a girl, and I did not respect the mouth that fed me. I buried this story in your child's ribs. I am sorry the grave is shallow. Come with us, Muzi said. Though he did not mean to say it, he wanted to keep her safe and he wanted to keep her near, and those two wants were not the same. I am too old to unlearn the paths my feet know, Makumalo said, but I will watch the door until your footprints return. They left in the hour before dawn, when night is too tired to protest and day has not yet found its voice. They walked until their legs sang with salt. Lulama rode on Muzi's shoulders, then on Malula's hip. Then he stumbled beside them, little-legged and stubborn. The path stretched, then folded in on itself. The trees seemed to lean closer, conferring. The river stayed on their left no matter how they walked. The mountains stayed in front of them no matter how they turned. By sunset, they found themselves looking at their own doorway. Circles, Malula said, her mouth a thin line. We made a circle without knowing we were drawing. They tried again the next day, and the next. Some days the wind moved in the wrong direction. Some days sound did not travel right. On one day they met themselves on the road and did not recognize themselves. On the 4th day, they stood in their yard with dust in their throats and defeat under their tongues. Lulama slept on the mat with his mouth open and his hands still clenched, as if holding the tales of dreams. That night, no one slept. The next morning, the first signs came, subtle like the first cough of someone about to be very ill. Dew did not form on the grass. Chickens pecked at empty ground and swallowed nothing. The river ran lower, though rain had brushed the hills in the dark. By the week's end, the granary reported a rot that spread like gossip. Maize stored with care turned sour. Beans split and refused to soften in the pot. Milk fell from the pail and broke into curds before the pail was home. By the month's end, children coughed and did not stop. Old men who joked they were too stubborn for death stopped joking. The healer's hut filled with bodies that wanted to be better but did not remember how. Whispers found easy mouths. Since the boy was born, they began. Ever since the mark, they said, that family's luck is a knife turned outward. Someone let slip, and someone else nodded as if they'd thought of it first. It is not easy to chase a man like Muzi from a village. His father's name still elbowed its way into conversations. His own hands had built fences that kept goats safe in storms. His wife had braided hair for free when a girl's grief made her forget how. But hunger shifts the weight of a community. What was once too heavy to move becomes light enough to push. Makumalo's face thinned. The cough came and did not leave. Lulama's belly stayed around for the wrong reason. Malula lay awake and listened to the village's sleep stumble and catch. Muzi stood a long time on the step, watching the road that could not be walked. The only line left was the old one, the one drawn 5 years ago across the floor of his hut by a shadow with a gold gaze. He waited until Malula went to the river. He tied his sandals, he took the gourd. "Come, son," he said, because he could not yet shape the words. "Forgive me into anything a 5-year-old could hold." Lulama loved walking with his father. He loved the way the tall grass made long, secret rooms around them. He loved the way the forest smelled like stories. "Where are we going?" he asked, when the trees grew serious and the path grew less certain. "To say thank you," Muzi said, "to something very old." "Will it say you're welcome?" Lulama asked. "Yes," Muzi said, because he needed one true thing in a day made of untrue things. It always answers. They reached the place where the waterfall hid itself like a jewel behind leaves. It was exactly as it had been when Makumalo first saw it, and not at all the same. It held a new sound that was not water. The tiger sat on a rock, as patient as stone and as heavy as the first word someone ever spoke. It did not look at Muzi first. It looked at the boy. The boy looked back, unafraid, as if assessing a large cat in need of a friend. "You have come," the tiger said, and the air tasted of iron filings, of a storm choosing where to fall. "I have come," Muzi said, and his voice did not shake because it had already shaken so much the night had taken pity and steadied it for him. "Death pays itself," the tiger said, "but grace allows you to choose the coin." "I have heard there are 2 coins," Muzi said. "One is my son. The other is you," the tiger said. "Blood that bears the mark is acceptable. A life that understands the line between teeth and tongue. A body that can hold a roar without breaking the bone." "If I give myself," Muzi said, "my son returns to his mother." "Yes," the tiger said, as if discussing how much salt to add to a pot. "The water will call the girl child later, as was promised, if a girl child ever comes. The village will breathe. The river will remember you were polite." "And if I give him?" Muzi asked, though the shape of the question made him sick. "Then you will live," the tiger said. "You will live a life shaped like fear and explained by hunger. You will walk through a village that spits at your feet to keep from tasting grief. And you will pretend the spit is rain." The tiger lowered its head. "Both are true. Both are choices. Both settle the numbers." Muzi looked at his son. Lulama was trying to scoop the waterfall into his hands and keep it there. He laughed when the water fled his fingers. He tried again. He laughed again. He did not know he stood in a doorway with 2 rooms behind it, and that only one would keep his bed. "Baba," he said, wet hands reheating in the sun on Muzi's cheeks. "Are we saying thank you yet?" "We are," Muzi said, and his knees failed him. He knelt and pulled the boy close. He smelled smoke in his son's hair and soil on his neck, in the milk he still sometimes spilled on his shirt. He kissed him on the crown. "Listen," he said, and he did not know how to make goodbye sound like a game. "You will go and wait with the trees. When you name the birds, name them quietly. When you drink, drink little sips. When you are afraid, look for your mother inside the leaves. She looks back from all green things." Lulama's brow furrowed. "I don't want to go." "I know," Muzi said. "I know." He stood because fathers must stand when the floor opens. He faced the tiger. "I will pay." The tiger blinked, and the sunlight once removed flashed like a blade inside its eyes. "You understand," it said. "This is not death, it is a translation." "Say it in a language my mother will believe," Muzi said. "Tell her I am not gone, only moved into a house made of claw and vow." The tiger's mouth made the shape of a smile, without ever deciding to be one. "You will be the white that patrols the edge of stories," it said. "You will be the breath that stops men from speaking when they should listen. You will be the rumor goats refuse to graze near. You will be the thing children draw when they are trying to draw courage. What else? You will be misunderstood, the tiger said. By many, for a long time. That is part of the job. Muzi nodded. I have practice. He turned to his son. He placed the gourd in Lulama's hands. Give this to your mother, he said. Tell her I kept the proof safe until I could put it in safer hands. What is it? Lulama asked. Something white, Muzi said, that weighs more than it looks. He looked beyond the boy, past him, into the place where future stands like a person trying to be polite. He saw nothing, which is what men always see when they look too far. He forced himself to look at the present instead, and there he found everything. Go now, he said softly. Run home. Run like you are chasing your own name. How will you come home? Lulama asked, and it was the only question that mattered. In the rain, Muzi said. You will hear me first. Lulama did not want to leave. He wanted to knot his fingers in his father's shirt and be a small storm there forever. But children also know when a moment has to be obeyed, even if it cannot be understood. He ran. The tiger stood. The forest stilled. Come, it said. Muzi stepped forward. There is no way to describe what happened next without borrowing from the language of weather. Lightning did not strike, and yet it struck. Thunder did not speak, and yet it made a sound so low it cleaned the bones. Wind did not rise, and yet everything leaned. The tiger's mouth opened, and the air around it folded inward, and Muzi did not enter so much as he was rewritten. For a breath, he was a man and a promise. For another breath, he was a memory and a muscle. For one more, he was the word father translated into the word guard. Then he was the white thing at the edge of the trees. He looked down at himself and knew he had not become other so much as he had become more. The claws were not new. They were old tools, finally visible. The roar was not new. It was the old grief given a place to stand. He turned his head toward the village and listened. Just before Lulama reached the hut, the sky changed its mind. Clouds shouldered one another into place. A wind with clean teeth swept the dust off the road and threw it back into the fields. The first drop fell and the ground leaned up to kiss it. Melula heard her son's feet before she heard the rain. She ran into the yard and found him there, wet-faced, holding a gourd as if it contained something that might fly away. Mama, he said, and he was crying and smiling and hiccuping and laughing. He said to give you the white thing. He said to name the birds quietly. He said to look for you in leaves. She took the gourd. She opened it. Inside lay a single hair, curved, shining, impossible, ordinary. The hair of a god, the hair of a husband. She sank to her knees, and Lulama climbed into her as if she were both boat and shore. Around them, the village lifted its face. Rain remembered how to be rain. The coughs softened their edges and slipped away into the corners. Granaries that had sulked opened their lids and felt the old pride return. Beans turned gentle in the pot. Milk stayed milk in the pail all the way home. People noticed. Some said, the boy returned alone and the clouds followed him. Some said, the debt took the shape of a man and walked into the forest to pay itself. Some said nothing at all, because the mouth often fails when the heart is relieved too quickly. When the 6th year began, Lulama asked a question he had been making inside himself. Mama, he said, will we have another baby? Melula looked at the trees before she looked at her son. If a child comes, she said, we will name her with water words and teach her to listen to rivers. And if he is a boy, Lulama asked, then we will teach him to listen as well, she said. Listening is how we stay in the same story as the people we love. Lulama nodded as if he had ordered the day to be true, and the day had agreed. Do you think the white tiger was a curse or a guardian in disguise?